Hello everyone and welcome to this editing session. Today we're just gonna work in Lightroom as to speed up the whole process a bit so the video doesn't get too long. So let's jump straight into this. We have 4 pictures here. Here we have the first one, second, the third, and the fourth and final. The 3 first ones are shot with a 70-200 and the last one is the wide angle shot. Let's just clarify that I like the wide angle shot the most, so yeah, but let's start at the beginning here. First and foremost, what I don't really like with this one is the current crop, so I'm gonna actually crop it a bit more, change the aspect ratio a bit so it's not too long, and I'm just gonna bring it in a bit closer here to something like, let's see here, something like this, I think. Yeah, so we just see the water, perhaps a bit more. Can we get a bit more of the upper part? So yeah, I like this. And what we're going to do now is apply a profile. I like the landscape. Well, let me just go back here. It's kind of flat. You can see it's got a nice representation, but it's kind of flat. So I like, with the landscape, I really bring out some of the color and a bit of contrast as well. What I'm going to do with this one is actually turn it into a black and white. So I'm going to do that right now. Yeah, and now I'm just gonna, we can see on the histogram here what we got, so we're gonna bring up the highlights a bit and bring up the whites a little bit. You see, bring a bit more shadows in and turn the blacks toward, just so it's touching it. Add a little bit of clarity into the mix, and we're gonna, here on effects, we can add a little bit of dehaze as well. Might have turned it darks a bit dark, so bring up the shadow just until it doesn't hit anymore, or something like this. Perhaps bring the contrasts a bit higher, increase the highlights, something like that. So there we go, a before and after. It's not too advanced, but I kind of like it. So let's move on. As I said, this is a quick one. I'm trying to make this kind of quick, so trying to make these changes quite fast. Well, here we're going to do the same. Apply a landscape profile. Here you can really see it did a big change, really brought out a lot more in the image. What I'm going to do now is actually change the hue a bit. You can see all the screen, I don't really like it, so we're gonna take it and make the image a bit more fallish. So we're gonna make the colors a bit more like fall colors, something like this perhaps. Now it really seems like I took this image at a later stage in fall. I really took this at the beginning, but anyway, let's move on. Could actually bring up the saturation a little bit on these ones, bring down the luminance of the green a little bit, bring up the one on yellow and on this one as well. So I really like that. So let's go back here to the basics. You can see we got the majority of the image is quite dark actually, so we could bring that up. And then we could drag it back. That really adds. Actually, we couldn't bring up a bit more here as well. And then instead of using the blacks here, I could go to the tone curves and just drag them something like this. That's really starting to look quite nice. So let's work on the highlights now. The water is really supposed to be kind of white, so we can bring up the highlights just a little bit here. It's starting to look quite nice, and holding in Alt we can just drag it, and we see where the white points are starting to come forth. But at the same time I want to see what it's actually doing, so something like this. You can also see here well, the highlight clipping when you're dragging it. So yeah, that looks kind of nice. Perhaps is it a little bit too warm? Is that better? I always like to go back and forth between the changes just to see. I actually think that looks a little bit better. So bring it up a little bit more. Yeah, I like it there. I'm not really sure about the crop. I think it's a bit crooked actually, but I'm not sure. Let's just try and see what we can do here. If this actually would help, just a little bit perhaps. Is that any better? Well, I think it might be a little bit better. So let's add a little bit of clarity, a little bit more vibrance, and some of this dehaze, because it was kind of flat light on this day. So something like that. And now we've got a before and after. That's quite a big change, quite a nice improvement, I think. So yeah, we're just gonna leave this image at that, I think. I'm now actually, this is the next image, and it's kind of similar to this in a way. I want to make similar changes, so I'm just gonna copy, well, not everything. I'm not gonna take the crop, but I'm gonna take the rest of it. Oh, and you know what I forgot? Lens correction. I really don't think that I need the profile correction, but I want the chromatic aberration. So let's just do that. And now we can just paste this, and it doesn't look good at all. So let's reset all the tonal changes. Let's see how it looks. It's this one, of course. So yeah, but we got the colors, which are the most important parts really. What we're going to do now is bring up the exposure quite a bit, something like that, and still bring out the highlights or the shadows a bit. Perhaps bring up the yeah, a little bit. And what we can do now is go to the tone curve again, and just, I think I brought up the exposure a bit too much. So let's bring it down a little bit. Yeah, let's see here. You know what? I'm just gonna bring down make a bit of an S curve. Do something like this. I still think that the dark parts are actually a bit too dark. I think I'm gonna decrease the contrast just a little bit. Then go with the black towards here. I want to crop it to another aspect ratio, and I'm gonna put it so that the bush is just cut where or the image ends just where the bush ends. Something like this. Yeah, let's add a bit more white. And let's reduce the black a little bit. Something like that. Perhaps reduce the clarity a little bit here, because I think it's a bit too much detail, or well, it's just too much already really. I want to bring it down a bit more, make it a bit smoother, add a little bit of vibrance into it, perhaps reduce the contrast just a little bit more. Yeah, and this could actually be up here. Something like this. And what we actually could do on this one is really to go to, well, still on effect, add a bit of a vignette. But perhaps not. I'm going to add a vignette this way instead. So go to this circular, what is it called? Radial filter tool. And then we're going to add a burn. Just drag it out. Make sure that it's not inverted. Make it feather 100%, and then really like bring out the edges so that we just have, or perhaps not feather it that much. Let's go to 50. And then I'm gonna duplicate it. I'm gonna invert it, and then I'm gonna select my Lightroom preset and increase the feather and raise it up a little bit so that we have it mostly here in the top part. Yeah, how does that look before and after? It really pulls the eye more towards the center, I think. Yeah, well, I am not really sure that I like this image as much. I actually think that the details of something like this picture is a lot nicer. The same with this one, actually. If it would have been more water, I think this image could have been a lot nicer, but yeah, well, I don't really like it right now. So let's move to the last one. The wide angle shot that I actually like the most. Again, let's start here. Well, first and foremost, let's increase the exposure a bit. It's a bit dark, you can see it here on the histogram, that we have the majority of the data to, well, a darker point. So I'm just going to bring it up a little bit. We get a spike here, but we're going to solve that soon. First and foremost, secondly rather, camera calibration. Let's add some, yeah, landscape. Now we're gonna decrease the highlights just so we can get back some of the blue in the sky. We're gonna open up the shadows just a little bit and then close them down again, increase the contrast a little bit. Same with the whites, just a little bit. You know, could actually increase the white, I think. Let's add a graduated filter here, something like this, and I don't want to increase the exposure, but just the white. Something like this, perhaps. Well, something like that I think is actually kind of good. What we did there was actually increase the white point so that we could get the water more towards white, but still leave some of the sky open, and that makes it so that the interest, or well, the brightest point of the picture is now down here and not up in the sky, meaning that your eye will fall more naturally here in the foreground, which is a good thing. We're going to crop this one as well. The reason why I'm going for the 4/3 crop is because I think the original one, the 2/3 one, is just, when you have it standing, it's just too narrow and too high. So we're going to do this, and I'm going to make it so that I remove a bit of the white point, the white things down there, and then just not crop out this tree. So that looks pretty good to me. Yeah, so we're gonna add a bit of dehaze, We could do the same thing, go in here and play around with color, drag the greens a bit more towards the yellow a bit more towards the orange. Not as extreme as the other ones, because I think this image actually can stand a bit more in itself. Here we have some reds, I think I want to bring out that a bit more. Same with this. What we can do here is actually reduce the brightness of the blue, as long as it doesn't affect too much of the water. You can even increase the saturation of the blue a bit, just so the sky turns a bit more blue here. Yeah, how is the before and after here? It's a bit more subtle, but I like it. Just bring up the white point of the whole image just a little bit more. Something like, let's do it like this. And I think that looks kind of good. So let's see, how is the before and after? Should we call it at that? I think that looks pretty good, actually. Yeah, I'm not really finished with this picture. I'm gonna work a bit more on it in Photoshop, but I don't want to drag it out too much, so let's call it at that. So that's it for me this time. I hope you enjoyed watching this. If you like it, please subscribe if you want to see more. Yeah, you know, that subscribe button really means a lot for that. It's the same with the likes, and please leave any kind of feedback so that I know what I can improve in the future. What you really like more, if you would like to have seen the Photoshop edit part or not. I really think these videos can easily turn out to be way too long if they turn out to be more than 20 minutes. I know that very few are gonna have the time to watch it even if they wanted to. So yeah, feedback is great. Anyway, that's it for me this time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.